بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Welcome everybody in this new semester. As we introduced in the first introductory session that inshallah we are going to consider this book, Computer Security Principles and Practice, the third edition by William Stallings and Dory Brown, as the main compulsory textbook for this course. We are going to start with Chapter 1, Overview. These chapters provide an overview of computer security. We are going to start with a discussion of what we mean by computer security. In essence, computer security deals with computer-related assets that are subject to a variety of threats and for which various measures are taken to protect those assets. So this chapter is considered as the baseline for all the forthcoming chapters during the semester, during this semester. Okay, so please try to pay due attention to all the concepts that we are going to introduce in this chapter. It is like the infrastructure for all the other concepts that we are going to discuss later in the forthcoming weeks. I believe that if you don't understand these topics, so you may struggle to follow up in the following weeks. Let's start with the definition of computer security. The American National Institute of Science and Technology defines the computer security as shown here in this slide. This is one of the examples of different definitions that you may see on the internet or on other textbooks by different authors, but they mainly focus on the main topics that we are going to introduce here. By the way, try to not just memorize the concepts that we are going to introduce, like definitions and others, but try to understand them, and then during quizzes and exams you can phrase them in your own way. Once you cover all the main key terms, try to specify the key terms, key terminologies in any definition, and try to cover them on your definition, or even if you use any other synonyms for them, it is acceptable. Okay, but the most important thing that in any exam that you show me that you understand the topic that we are talking about. Okay, the computer security here. What is it? It is the protection. So this is the first keyword here. The protection afforded to an automated information system in order to attain the applicable objectives of preserving the integrity, availability, and confidentiality of what? Of information system resources. These resources, information system resources, includes hardware, software, firmware, information data, and telecommunications. So what are the keywords here? Protection. Okay. This protection for what? An automated information system. So it is not just information system, it is automated information system, or in other words, digital information system. The plain information system may be considered or as just the paper archive information system. It is not always a digital one, but here we are concerning about the automated, the digital information system. So it is a protection for a digital information system. What is its purpose? What is its objective? Its goals? To preserve what? Integrity, availability, and confidentiality of information system resources. These three main concepts, integrity, availability, and confidentiality, are the main concepts in cybersecurity, in computer security, in information security. They are called together CIA or AIC or IAC in any order. So it is confidentiality, it's like triangle. They have to be preserved all together. Confidentiality, integrity, and availability of what? Of the data and services. So in order to protect the data and services, we must protect the data and services against any intrusion that may affect or compromise the confidentiality of it, or integrity, or availability, or two of them, or all of them. Okay? So what do we mean by confidentiality? Confidentiality is preserving authorized restrictions on information access and disclosure, including means for protecting personal privacy and proprietary information. So in other words, it is protecting the data or services from being accessed by any unauthorized parties in general, either it is a user or even another system. So we must protect our data or even our systems, our hardware, to be only accessed and only read by authorized parties, authorized persons, or authorized systems in general. Authorized, we mean that those that have the authority, the privilege, the permission to access them. Okay? Those data can be related to personal things, so it is called privacy, or it might be just related to the organization or government, so it is considered confidentiality. Okay, so it is not protecting against changing the data or the system settings, for example, but only against even the accessing it or reading it. For example, you as a student have the permission to access the grades of your transcript. You can see the grades, the marks of the courses that you have completed or studied here in the college. Okay, you have the authority, but anyone else other than you, registration office, for example, and the instructor, the faculty member that have taught you that course, will not be able to see, even to read, to access your marks. So there it is confidential. This means that they are only be seen or accessed by the allowed persons. Okay, what about the integrity? The other one, the other concept of the CIA triad is protecting, guarding against improper information modification, change, or destruction, including ensuring information non-repudiation and authenticity. Integrity, this means that some person, for example, or parties in general, may be able to access or to see or to read specific data, but are not allowed to modify, to change them. So only those that has the authority, the permission to change, to modify the data or system settings, are allowed to do so. So we keep the integrity. For example, in our earlier example about your marks or grades as a student, yes, you and your instructor has the permission to see your grades and marks, but you only have the permission to read them. However, the instructor who taught you that course has the authority, the permission to modify those grades. Okay? Why it is important to protect the integrity? There are many reasons for that. One of them is to avoid non-repudiation, to ensure the authenticity and avoid non-repudiation. Authenticity means that we are making sure that the version that it is stored in our database or the settings of our system is as it has been set, or it has been stored by the authentic, the original authorized person for that. Okay, whereas non-repudiation, it is like against the rejection. It is called in Arabic al-inkar, adam al-inkar. Here, this is an important jurisprudence term that you may find it in court if there is any digital crime, for example, and the police are accusing a suspect that he did so or he stole money from another person accounts, or he sent a porno photo, for example, or video to a child, or another digital crime. So here, if we are sure that the data is integral, we are sure about the integrity of the data, so here the criminal cannot repudiate his action. We are sure that he is the one who committed that crime. Okay, so this is about the integrity. What about the third one, the availability? It is ensuring timely and reliable access to and use of information, making sure that the data or the system or applications are available to authorized persons when they need them. Like, for example, when you did the courses registration, enrollment, through the SIS, Student Information System, usually or supposedly it is the SIS is supposed to be available to you when it is set, when you are allowed to do so for your batch, for example, from this time to this time. When they say that you are supposed to be able to register your courses, so this means that the system should be there, should be run well, with the full bandwidth, with good speed, good functionality. If it is not available at the time when the beneficiary, the customers, the users are supposed to have access to, so this is one of the intrusions to this concept of security. So at all time we need to keep our data and services in terms of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. We are going to see some attacks against these three concepts during this semester. Here, for example, we have spying, and that is against the confidentiality. Some attackers, some digital criminals are having access or seeing specific data that they are not authorized to. Some attackers modify or destroy specific data or systems, so this is against integrity. And some attackers are either blocking websites or services or even data while they are supposed to be running well. So here it is not only blocking or stopping the service or data completely, but even if we are slowing it down. As an example, one of the attacks against this is DOS, denial of service. Okay, there are different levels of impacts like the negative effects against services or data in general. There are many ways to categorize them: 4 levels, 5 levels, more or less, but it depends on the diversity of the data and systems. Here, for example, we have 3 levels of impact: low, moderate, and high. By the way, try to use your logic, your common sense in this course. Most, if not all, the concepts here can be inferred by the common sense. So link between the title of the concept and its definition. Low, for example, here, the loss caused by a specific attack or expected attack or threat, specific risk even, may be limited here on the organizational, operational, or even individual. Okay, moderate, that the loss, the effect, the negative effects, if that risk or that threat is taken out, is carried out, it will be moderate, medium, and high if there are severe, catastrophic, adverse effects, negative effects, if that risk is carried out. Okay, there are many challenges for computer security. Computer security, information security, cyber security, those buzzwords, buzz concepts that you are hearing in the last 5 years, they are related to almost the same thing. As we are living on the digital era, so the majority of our data and information are stored digitally. The majority, if not all of them, are being transmitted using networks, either intranet, locally, or even on the internet. Okay, so we need, as cybersecurity specialists, we need to protect the data on their location where they are stored, like servers, drivers, computers, and we need also to protect them on the way while they are transmitted from computer to another computer, or to the cloud, or to the server, and so on. So we need to protect them on their location and while they are transmitted or transferred, sent, intransient, it is called. So as you can see that like the interest on computer security is getting increased nowadays, especially at the time of warfare, digital warfare or cyber warfare, حروب الإلكترونية أو الفضائية المتوقعة. So there are some challenges there. Computer security here is not as simple as it might first appear to the novice, the beginners. There are some potential attacks that may have adverse effects, severe effects, that is not only affecting individuals' devices, but the adverse effect may reach the governments, the large organizations. It may even reach the lives of individuals. It may be like a threat to the life of people. It is not an exaggeration, but this is the reality. Imagine that we are using now an autonomous car, self-driving car, and it is been attacked by an attacker that is diverting it from the correct way to a wall, or to it is over controlled to bypass the traffic lights and have an accident and a crash to another car. It may injure or even kill people. Okay, so procedures, preventative, let's say, procedures needs to be put in place to protect the data, the systems, and as a result, people's lives. In all ways, in terms of the physical way and logical way. If we are protecting our emails, for example, logically, in a logical way, by introducing a strong authentication system, for example, with a strong, let's say, passwords. It is okay, it is acceptable, but if we let our systems open without attendance, without locking it, so the setting of the passwords was useless, was meaningless. So we need to consider both physical and logical security measures. As the protection of cybersecurity is advancing, on the other side, the skills and capabilities of the attackers, of the hackers, are being developed as well. So they are like on a race. Who is going to reach the final line, or who is going to win? Other challenges is that still, even though that you see that like the governments generally around the world and especially in Saudi Arabia here are paying attention to cybersecurity in general, and you can see this by the decree of King Salman 3 years ago, when he established the National Cybersecurity Authority here in Saudi Arabia, هي الوطنية للأمن السيبراني. And even there is the Saudi Federation for Cybersecurity Programming and Drones. But still, unfortunately, some or many, let's say, many organizations, top management in general, especially the private ones, still they tend not to see the benefits of security until the failure occurs. Security requires regular and constant monitoring. It is not just buying, for example, a software and that's it. There should be like monitoring system, continuous one. There should be continuous professional developments for the staff who is working on that and so on. Another main challenge is the balance or the trade-off between security and user friendliness, or in other words, it's called usability. It is okay to introduce a strong security system, but it has to be easy to use. It has to be user friendly, usable. Okay, it is easy to, for example, to impose a password policy that all staff or employees of our organization should have a 20 character long password, and after 1 minute of inactivity the system will be locked and the user has to re-enter the 20 character long password again. It is easy to set that and enforce it, but is it user friendly to user? Let alone the difficulty of memorizing those characters, that long of password, let alone the workaround that the staff may do to help themselves remembering it or writing it down or sharing it or using like an easy to guess password. It is even like inconvenient. It is annoying to lock the system after 1 minute. The employee might not be even to think about something or a sentence to write in the email, and then the system will be locked. It has to be in a way that it is easy for the user to use while it is secure as well. So there should be a balance between that. The balance, we are going to talk about it later, but it depends on many factors. It depends on the value of the asset that you are going to protect, and for example, it depends on the effect, the impact of the intrusion of the attack if it happens to or against that asset, if it is high or mid, moderate or low, and so on. So these are some of the concepts that we may or we will see during this semester. Try to read them, understand them, study them well. Just quickly and briefly, adversary, it is like a threat agent, like an attacker. That attackers, it is an identity. It can be a person, can be another system, and so on. The attack is the illegal act against a system or an individual or a data. So any attempt, either deliberately or intentionally, or unintentionally, it is considered an attack. So we have to set the measures, the countermeasures, to avoid both the intentional and unintentional acts or attacks. The countermeasure, or sometimes it's called just measures, it is anything that you do to reduce or to prevent or to deal with an attack or threat or vulnerability. Okay, so that countermeasure can be an action, a device, procedure, or technique. Okay, so it is usually an attempt to prevent. As usually it is difficult to prevent 100%. So minimize, reduce, alleviate, discover, detect, and the reaction afterwards. So all these are considered countermeasures. What about risk? Risk is an expectation loss based on the probability that a particular threat will exploit a particular vulnerability. So a specific threat will exploit a specific vulnerability, weakness. This possibility is considered a risk. So usually the risk comes like in a form of percentage. 100%, 90%, 10% will happen, and so on. Security policy, a set of rules and practices that specify or regulate how a system or organization provides security services to protect sensitive and critical system resources. System resources, it is as we stated at the beginning of this lecture, it can be a hardware, firmware, software, and so on. Okay, the threat that we mentioned while defining the risk is a potential for violation of security, which exists when there is a circumstance, capability, or action or event that could breach security and cause harm. That is, a threat is possible danger that might exploit vulnerability. The vulnerability is a flaw, a weakness in a system design or implementation or operation and management that could be exploited by a threat to violate the system security policy. So the vulnerability is the weakness. Think about the computer lab, for example, here in the college, that if it doesn't have a door lock, usually the lab has 27 to 30 computers. So if there is no door lock, so this is a vulnerability. This is a weakness on the security design. So what is this is the vulnerability. There is no door lock. There is no access control, it is called. What is the threat that can exploit this weakness, this vulnerability? The threat is stealing one or all of the computers. So the violation is taking away or stealing the computers in the labs by exploiting the non-existence of the door lock. So what is the probability of that threat to occur? It is, for example, 10%, 20%, depends, and it differs from an environment to another environment. Here is the relationships between those different concepts that we talked about. The assets or the system resources that we mentioned can be hardware, software, data, or even communication facilities and networks. The vulnerabilities, threats, and attacks, those three main concepts or terminologies that we mentioned in the terminologies list. The vulnerabilities can be categorized based on the CIA triad. If it is against integrity, so it is corruption of data or of hardware and so on. If it is against confidentiality, so it is leaking the data, for example. If it is against the availability, it is either unavailable or very slow, not functioning well. The threats capable of exploiting vulnerabilities. So as we said, that the threats exploiting one or more of the vulnerabilities. It represents potential security harm to an asset. The attacks that are threats carried out, if a threat is carried out, happens, so it is called attacks now. So it is a threat before happening. If it happens, so it is an attack. The attack can be categorized into passive and active, or insider and outsider, or both. Active is clear, that attempts to alter, to modify system resources. So it is doing something, changing something. Okay? Whereas passive attempt to learn or make use of information, spying, collecting, without affecting the system resources. Insider and outsider. The outsider, it is the obvious one, clear one to us, when the attack is initiated from outside the perimeter, outside the organizations, let's say. Whereas the insider, that is still a threat, is initiated from within the perimeter, the organization, for example. The countermeasures that we can put in place to protect against those threats, usually the three countermeasures or three goals of the countermeasures to deal with security attacks is to first prevent, as we said that it's not possible to 100% prevent all sorts of attacks, so we have to go to the next step. If one or more has passed the prevention countermeasures, so we have to detect it as soon as possible in a timely fashion. Okay, what about if we detect it? If we detect it, we have to have a recovery plan, recovery action. Okay? We have to pay attention to the residual vulnerabilities that may remain after all these countermeasures. And totally important is we have to be careful of introducing a new vulnerability, new vulnerabilities. Sometimes we deal with a specific attack, but we open another vulnerability. So the goal is to minimize the residual levels of risk to the assets.